It's high time to awake. Bible prophecy with Craig C. White. Hello, everybody. This is Craig C. White with High Time to Awake. Today's message is titled, The Nations Are Disquieted Over Syria, a verse-by-verse look through Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 23 through 27. In Jeremiah chapter 49:23, it says, Concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea. It cannot be quiet. Jeremiah is talking about the destruction of Damascus. In verse 23, he's actually describing an invasion coming from northwestern Syria. The towns of Hamah, or Hamath is in the King James, and Arpad hear evil reports of a coming invasion, and they are faint-hearted. Hamah and Arpad are cities today in Syria. Hamah is Syria's fifth largest city in northwest Syria, very close to the Turkish border. And Arpad is actually the city today called Tell Rifaat. It's Rafaat. And that is a city just about 25 miles north of Aleppo. Aleppo is Syria's largest city, and Arpad is very close to the Turkish border, just north of Aleppo. So Jeremiah is warning us that the northwestern cities will hear evil reports of a coming invasion, and the only place that it could be coming from would be the Turkish border, since they're right near the Turkish border. So I think Jeremiah is telling us that this invasion is coming from Turkey. And just for your information, Turkey has military troops of about 54,000 soldiers already amassed along the Syrian border. And they have a lot of heavy artillery and tanks and heavy weapons. So they're ready for an invasion. And Turkish President Erdogan has repeatedly told the world that he can't wait to oust Assad in Syria. And he's actually gained the support and permission from the UN, from the United States, from NATO, from the European Union to go ahead and go into Syria. He says he's going to create a safe zone in the north part of Syria along the Turkish border. But more than that, he wants to eliminate or at least push back the Kurds that have just declared a federal Kurdish zone in Syria. Turkish President Erdogan does not want the Kurds to have a Kurdish state on the Turkish border. So he's ready to go in to get the Kurds. And in Jeremiah 49, Hamah is the Kurdish people are there, but so are a lot of other different people. But Hamah today is controlled by pro-Assad citizens. So that's still an intact part of Syria. Arpad, or Tell Rifaat, is an area that was, until recently, held by Al-Qaeda rebels, mostly from Libya, actually, the Free Syrian Army that's been fighting against Assad and the Syrian army. They held that for a long time, but the Kurds just recently overthrew that area and took it back for themselves, and that's part of the area that they're declaring a federal region for the Kurds. So Turkey has all the motivation in the world right now to go into those areas, the very exact areas that Jeremiah is describing. And I think Jeremiah definitely is describing the events that are happening now. After the cities of Hamah and Arpad hear of the coming invasion, Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 24 tells us that the residents of Damascus flee. Jeremiah 49:24 says, Damascus is waxed feeble, and turneth herself to flee, and fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail. So the residents of Damascus are going to be terrified. When it says Damascus is waxed feeble, that's the idea of a person, or in this case a city, failing of its old age. It's preparing to die. It's preparing to relinquish its life, and the citizens are running away. So I think this describes almost completely empty city of Damascus. Damascus in the metropolitan area has about 2.5 million people, probably fewer now because of the war, although a lot of people from the outlying areas have actually taken refuge in Damascus. So Damascus still has a lot of people in it, and a good deal of it still is intact, and people are still living their day-to-day lives like they always have. But in Jeremiah 49, I think it tells us that most, if not all, of the residents are going to flee. There will still be somebody left in the city, and that's the army. And Jeremiah tells us a little bit about that later. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 25. How is a city of praise not left, the city of my joy? Two different Hebrew words for city are used in these verses. The city of praise is a fortified city that has been celebrated in song. When God says, how is the city not left, he could be communicating his astonishment that even after a terrible assault on Damascus, the city has not surrendered. When God calls Damascus the city of my joy, he is specifically saying that he delights in the city's old buildings. So I think Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 25 is actually and precisely describing the destruction of the neighborhood called Old Damascus. Old Damascus is the governmental seat of Syria. That's where the capital of Syria is, and that's where the oldest buildings and the oldest part of Damascus is located. So when Jeremiah is telling us that Damascus will be destroyed, it will be, but precisely the neighborhood of Old Damascus. So not everything in Damascus has to be wiped out, although so much of it already has been, at least the outskirts of it have been. But very precisely, Jeremiah is describing the neighborhood of Old Damascus, which is the governmental seat and oldest part of the city of Damascus. I told you that somebody would be left in the city, and Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 26 tells us who. It says, therefore her young men shall fall in the streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. The young men here are contrasted with the men of war. And I just want to tell you that over the last few years during the Syrian war, the citizens of Syria have actually formed the Syrian National Defense Force, which is basically a civil guard or a civilian guard. So the citizens of Syria are fighting along with the Syrian army. So it sounds like the Civil Defense Force will protect Damascus, perhaps be the first line of defense in Damascus when Turkey comes down to destroy it. Turkey is going to enter from the northwestern cities. The people of Damascus are going to hear about the trouble that's going on in the northwest, and they're going to flee Damascus. Then Turkey's coming down to destroy it. The young men, or the civil defense, will die in the streets defending Damascus. And then the army, the Syrian army, will also die in the city. In Jeremiah 49:26 it says, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day. So it sounds like the Syrian army is going to die to the last man defending the old city of Damascus. In Jeremiah 49:27 it says, I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. I just want to tell you, Ben-Hadad is just an old word that refers to the ancient thrones or capitals of Syrian kings in Damascus. So it's just identifying that old Damascus area where the old kings ruled and where the current president Assad rules from the capital in the old neighborhood of Damascus. And when it says, I will kindle a fire in the walls of Damascus, Jeremiah also refers to an Assyrian invasion into Syria. Assyria is from northern Iraq. A lot of people are confused about that, but that's the headquarters was in Nineveh in northern Iraq, which is today is the city of Mosul. But Jeremiah 49 refers to the Assyrian invasion of 734, and I think it also refers to the future invasion of Syria and destruction of Damascus, possibly in 2016. When it says, I will kindle a fire on the wall of Damascus, it's not referring to dropping an atomic bomb or anything like that. It's referring to sending an army. Just like God sent the Assyrians against Syria in 734 BC, he's going to send the Turks against Damascus, possibly very soon. So Turkey is going to enter Syria from the northwest border. You're probably going to hear in the news a lot more about Hamah and maybe Tell Rifaat, although you've already begun hearing about those cities. They are in the news. Turkey's been shelling all these cities that we've been talking about today. After Turkey enters with a ground force into northwestern Syria, they're going to march down into Damascus. During that time, the residents of Damascus are going to flee. Amos actually tells us where they're going. They're going into Jordan, to the city of Kirak, which is a significant refugee camp today. So anyway, they're going down into Jordan, heading towards the city of Kirak or town of Kirak. Then Turkey, the forces of Turkey, will come down into Damascus and probably shell Damascus for quite a while until the old neighbor of Damascus is wiped out. The army that's defending Damascus is wiped out. The civil defense force is wiped out in the streets. I think the young men and the army will fight to the death and never surrender until the last man, and the old city of Damascus will be destroyed. And after Turkey destroys Damascus, their plan is to install Muslim Brotherhood leadership in Syria. And once that's accomplished, Turkey, and especially Turkish President Erdogan, wants to create an Islamic union, including Syria. So the first four nations likely to be in that union will be Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Make sure you go to hightimetoawake.com, check out my Bible prophecy commentaries, and also check out my Bible prophecy books on Amazon. This is Craig C. White with hightimetoawake.com, and I'll see you next time.